There are times when someone's presence in your life is not neutral, it's poison. You keep them around out of habit, out of comfort, or out of fear that letting them go means you'll be alone. But the truth is, keeping the wrong person in your world costs you far more than losing them ever will. If a man has shown you he doesn't value you, if he's given you inconsistency, excuses, or half-hearted love, then the most powerful thing you can do is cut him off like he never existed. This isn't about being cruel, it's about reclaiming your energy. Because every time you answer that text, every time you check his updates, every time you leave the door cracked open, you hand him access to your peace. And that's too high a price. Cutting him off isn't revenge, it's self-preservation. It's the declaration that your future matters more than his presence. When you decide to cut him off completely, you stop waiting for his change, you stop chasing his attention, and you stop measuring your worth by how he treats you. You reclaim your dignity, your focus, and your power. And in that act, you don't just move on, you rise above. Because a man who didn't choose you doesn't deserve to shape your story. That's why you cut him off like he never existed, because in your world, he no longer does. Silence is one of the most underestimated yet powerful tools you have when it comes to cutting someone off. Often, people think closure comes from the final conversation, the emotional explanation, or the dramatic exit. They believe if they just say the right thing, it will give them peace. But the reality is, the words rarely change anything. A man who didn't listen to you when he had the chance won't suddenly understand when you deliver your good by speech. That's why silence is far more effective than any explanation. It says everything without saying a word. It removes you from the game, takes away his control, and reclaims your energy. When you stop responding, you take away his lifeline. Many men thrive on the fact that you'll always reply, even if it's a short message or a frustrated outburst. Every interaction, no matter how small, is a confirmation to him that he still occupies space in your life. He knows he can get a reaction out of you. Silence changes that dynamic instantly. When you don't answer, when you don't acknowledge, when you don't bite the bait, it unsettles him. It's not because you're playing a game, it's because you've stopped playing altogether. Silence also protects you, because every time you respond, you open yourself up to more confusion, more manipulation, and more false hope. Think about how many times you've told yourself, "I'll just reply once to be polite," or "I'll hear him out this one last time," and before you knew it, you were back in the cycle of disappointment. Every word you send is another thread that keeps you tied to him. Silence cuts those threads one by one until there's nothing holding you anymore. It gives you the clarity to see things as they are instead of getting drawn back into the illusion. Another powerful aspect of silence is that it forces you to confront your own emotions rather than trying to soothe them with his presence. When you don't reach for your phone, when you resist the urge to break the silence, you're teaching yourself to sit with the discomfort. That's where real healing happens. You realize that the world doesn't collapse just because he's not in it. You realize that your worth doesn't shrink when he's not validating you. Silence becomes the space where you grow stronger. Of course, silence isn't easy at first. There will be moments when you want to break it, when you feel the need to remind him of what he lost, or when loneliness makes you crave his attention again. That's when you need to remember, breaking silence isn't about him, it's about you giving up your power. Every time you hold back, you're proving to yourself that you can survive without his crumbs of affection. You're proving that you no longer need the validation of someone who couldn't value you fully. In time, silence becomes freedom. The less you engage, the more space you have for yourself, for your passions, for people who actually give back to you. You stop wasting energy on dead ends and start investing it in a future that excites you. Silence isn't just about cutting him off. It's about opening yourself up to a life that no longer revolves around him. That's the beauty of it. You don't need revenge, you don't need explanations, you don't even need his understanding. All you need is the strength to say nothing and let that silence speak louder than words ever could. When you truly want to cut someone off, the first thing you have to do is strip away the reminders that keep him alive in your world. These reminders aren't always obvious. Sometimes they're the text messages you scroll back to late at night, reading his words over and over. Sometimes they're the photos tucked away in your phone gallery that you can't bring yourself to delete. Sometimes it's a sweater he left at your place, or a gift he gave you that you still keep on your shelf. Each one seems harmless on its own, but together they form a web that keeps you emotionally tied to him. Removing every trace isn't just about cleaning your environment, it's about reclaiming your emotional space. Your brain is wired to connect objects and places to emotions. That's why when you see his shirt or a picture of the two of you, it doesn't just feel like fabric or pixels. It feels like him. It reopens wounds that we're trying to close. So long as those triggers are within reach, you'll keep reopening the door you're trying so hard to shut. Cutting him off means you make the tough decision to delete, remove, and let go of anything that links you to him. It might sting in the moment, but the relief comes after, when you realize how much calmer life feels without constant reminders pulling you back. Social media is one of the biggest culprits. Every time you check his profile, you give him power. Even if he doesn't know you're watching, you know. You let your emotions rise and fall depending on what he posts, who he follows, or who comments on his photos. That's not freedom, that's a digital leash. If you're serious about cutting him off, you have to unfollow, block, or mute, whatever it takes to stop giving him access to your mind through a screen. It's not about being petty, it's about being disciplined with your peace. Some people hold on to reminders because they think letting go of them means erasing the memories, but that's not true. The memories will always be there if you want them. What you're doing is refusing to live surrounded by constant triggers. Think about it like this. If you had a wound on your arm, you wouldn't keep poking at it every day just to see if it still hurts. You'd give it the chance to heal. Removing traces of him is giving your heart that same opportunity. And it's not just about physical things, it's also about habits. If you always drive by his street, if you keep hanging out at places you know he goes, if you keep replaying songs that remind you of him, you're still feeding the attachment. Rebuilding your world means creating new associations, new routines, new rituals that don't include him. It's about replacing the space he once filled with things that bring you peace and excitement instead of longing and pain. At first, this process may feel like losing pieces of your past. You might hesitate before deleting that last picture or tossing away that old letter. But the truth is, you're not losing, you're reclaiming. You're making room for something better, something that won't hurt you the way holding on does. And every time you remove one more trace, you're sending yourself a message. I choose me. I choose my future over my past. That's how you break free. Because cutting him off isn't just about saying goodbye. It's about removing the echoes of him so they no longer shape your present. One of the hardest parts about cutting someone off is the way your mind convinces you that without them, you've lost something essential. It feels like a hole has been left behind, like you've been robbed of a part of yourself that you can't get back. But the truth is, when you walk away from someone who didn't treat you the way you deserved, you aren't losing anything real. You're losing the illusion of who you thought they were. And when you can finally see that distinction clearly, everything changes. Absence feels like loss because the brain craves familiarity. You got used to his messages, his presence, the rhythm of how he fit into your daily life. The moment that rhythm stops, it feels like something valuable has been taken away. But what you need to remember is that consistency of contact does not equal consistency of care. A man can fill your phone with messages and still leave you empty. He can be present in your life while still withholding love, effort, and commitment. What you miss isn't the reality of him, but the dream you built around him, the fantasy that one day he would step up, the hope that he would become the man you needed. Cutting him off means letting that fantasy die so you can stop grieving a story that was never true. The absence is uncomfortable, but discomfort doesn't mean loss. In fact, the absence creates space. Space for you to rediscover yourself without being defined by his behavior. Space to connect with people who genuinely want to show up for you. Space to pour energy into passions that don't drain you. At first, the silence feels heavy, but over time you begin to notice how peaceful it is compared to the chaos he brought. What feels like loss in the beginning slowly reveals itself as freedom. It helps to remember that people often confuse attachment with love. You may feel an ache because you were attached to his presence, but attachment doesn't always mean something was good for you. Think about a bad habit like smoking. It becomes familiar, it creates an attachment, and when you quit it, you feel the absence of it. But no one would say you lost something valuable when you gave it up. They'd say you gained health, freedom, and a longer life. Cutting him off is the same. You might feel the ache of withdrawal, but what you're gaining is far more important than what you think you've lost. Another reason absence feels like loss is because of the way we romanticize memories. Your mind replays the best moments like a highlight reel, conveniently muting the arguments, the neglect, or the moments you cried yourself to sleep. If you only focus on the sweet fragments, of course, the absence feels devastating. But when you balance the picture and remember the pain alongside the pleasure, you realize what you've lost isn't a fairy tale. It's a struggle you no longer need to endure. The loss is actually a release from a cycle that drained your energy. True loss happens when you let someone who doesn't deserve your love continue to occupy your heart. That's the real theft of your time, your joy, your self-worth. So when you cut him off, you're not losing, you're reclaiming. You're pulling your energy back from a place it was wasted and investing it into yourself. The absence of him is not a void, it's an opening. An opening for healing, for new opportunities, for relationships that actually meet your needs instead of dangling them just out of reach. So the next time your heart whispers, "I lost him," remind yourself, no, you lost the illusion. You lost the version of him that only existed in your hope. What you gained is something far more valuable, the chance to live fully without the weight of someone who never gave you enough. His absence is not your loss. His absence is your beginning. Boundaries are the true test of whether you've really cut someone off or not. It's easy to block a number or delete a photo when emotions are high, but the real challenge comes later, when the loneliness sets in, when the curiosity creeps back, or when he tries to sneak his way into your life again. That's when weak boundaries collapse, and suddenly you find yourself right back where you started. If you want to cut him off like he never existed, your boundaries can't be made of paper. They need to be steel. A paper boundary is flimsy. It's the kind of rule you make in your head, but break the moment it gets tested. It's telling yourself, "I won't reply," and then replying when he sends something that stirs your emotions. It's saying, "I'm done checking his social media," and then secretly scrolling at night. Paper boundaries give you the illusion of strength without the reality of it. They tear the second pressure is applied. Steel boundaries, on the other hand, hold up no matter what. They don't bend just because you're tempted. They don't shatter just because he tries to come back with the same old charm. Building steel boundaries starts with clarity. You have to be brutally honest with yourself about why you need them. If you keep romanticizing him, you'll always find excuses to let him in again. But when you remind yourself of the hurt, the neglect, the patterns that never changed, you solidify your reasons. That clarity is what fuels the strength to hold your line. It's not about being cold or bitter. It's about protecting yourself from slipping back into a cycle that robs you of your worth. Steel boundaries are also about preparation. You have to expect that he may reach out, whether out of guilt, boredom, or ego. Many men test the waters just to see if they still have a place in your heart. If you don't prepare yourself for that possibility, you'll be blindsided and more likely to break your resolve. Decide ahead of time what your response will be, or better yet, decide that no response is the response. That way, when it happens, you don't have to think or debate with yourself. You just follow through with the decision you already made. Another key part of strong boundaries is accountability. Sometimes we're great at making promises to ourselves, but terrible at keeping them. If you really want to stay strong, bring someone you trust into the process. Tell a friend, I'm cutting him off, and if I ever tell you I'm thinking of replying, remind me why I shouldn't. Accountability takes your boundary from private hope to public commitment. It gives you an extra layer of strength when your own willpower feels shaky. Steel boundaries aren't about punishing him, they are about protecting you. They are a statement that you value your peace over his access. They're a shield against the backhand, forth that keeps you stuck. And the beauty of boundaries is that the longer you enforce them, the less effort it takes. At first, it feels like you're constantly resisting temptation, but over time, silence becomes your normal and he fades from your world. Your boundaries don't just keep him out, they give you the breathing room to heal and grow without being dragged back into old wounds. Weak boundaries will always leave the door open just a crack, and that's all it takes for him to walk right back in. Strong boundaries slam the door shut and lock it for good. When you cut him off with steel boundaries, you send a powerful message, not to him, but to yourself. The message is, I am no longer available for what hurts me. I am no longer negotiable, and once you internalize that truth, cutting him off isn't a battle anymore. It becomes who you are. When you cut someone off, there's a vacuum that gets created in your life. He used to occupy your thoughts, your emotions, your energy, even your time. Whether he gave you consistency or chaos, he was still taking up space. And if you don't intentionally refill that space with something new, your mind will instinctively reach for the familiar, which is him. That's why redirecting your energy is one of the most powerful steps in truly removing him from your world. It's not just about closing the door on him, it's about opening doors to everything else that can give you meaning, joy, and fulfillment. Think about how much attention you once gave him waiting for his messages, analyzing his words, wondering about his feelings, replaying old memories. That energy doesn't just disappear because he's gone. It's still inside you, but it needs a new direction. If you leave it unused, it becomes restless, and that's when you find yourself tempted to go back, to check his profile, or to wonder if he misses you. The solution isn't to suppress that energy, it's to redirect it. When you pour yourself into passions, friendships, goals, and growth, you give that energy a place to thrive. Suddenly, it's not about what you've lost, it's about what you're building. Rebuilding your world starts with small, intentional actions. It might mean reconnecting with friends you neglected while you were caught up in him. It might mean throwing yourself into a project at work that excites you, or finally starting that hobby you always said you didn't have time for. It might mean focusing on your health, your fitness, your personal development, anything that reminds you that your life is so much bigger than him. Every time you choose one of these actions over giving him your attention, you're retraining your brain to associate your energy with progress instead of pain. What's important to understand is that redirecting your energy isn't just a distraction tactic. It's not about filling the void temporarily so you don't think about him. It's about creating a life that is so rich and fulfilling that you don't need to go back. You're not running from the absence, you're replacing it with presence. With joy, with things that actually reward you. That's the difference between healing and avoidance. Avoidance keeps you stuck in cycles, but true redirection creates a new path forward. Another thing to remember is that people often think they'll rebuild their lives once the pain has gone away. But it works the other way around. The pain goes away when you start rebuilding. The more you invest in yourself, the less room there is for him in your thoughts. The more you focus on your goals, the more irrelevant he becomes. Growth doesn't wait for healing. Growth is what creates healing. That's why redirecting your energy is non-negotiable if you want to cut him off completely. The beauty of this process is that over time, you stop even thinking of it as moving on from him. It just becomes you living your life. You start to look around and realize you're surrounded by people, projects, and passions that make you feel alive. You stop measuring your worth by his absence or his attention, because your worth is being validated every day by the choices you make for yourself. And eventually, he doesn't just fade into the background. He becomes irrelevant. Redirecting your energy is not about proving to him that you're fine without him. It's about proving to yourself that your life was never meant to orbit around one person. It's about showing yourself how much more you are capable of when you stop pouring into someone who didn't pour back. When you channel that same devotion, consistency, and care into yourself and your world, you don't just cut him off. You build a life so incredible that it feels like he never existed in the first place. One of the most difficult parts of cutting someone off is not the actual act of blocking their number or walking away, but what happens afterward. The doubts that creep in when the silence stretches on. You start to wonder if you were too harsh, if maybe you should have given him another chance, if perhaps he'll change now that you're gone. That back and forth battle in your head is what keeps so many people stuck. The key to truly cutting him off is owning your decision and refusing to look back. When you make peace with the fact that it wasn't punishment, but self-respect, you stop questioning yourself and start standing tall in your choice. Doubt loves to play tricks on the heart. It magnifies the good memories and minimizes the pain. You'll find yourself remembering the laughter, the sweet moments, the connection, but forgetting the times he let you down, the times he was inconsistent, the nights you felt alone even when you were with him. Your mind tries to rewrite history because it craves comfort over truth. That's why you need to remind yourself consistently why you walked away in the first place. You didn't make this decision lightly. You didn't cut him off on a whim. You cut him off because he showed you through words, actions, or lack thereof, that he wasn't willing to give you the love and respect you deserve. Owning your decision means trusting yourself enough to believe that truth. There will be moments when loneliness tempts you to look back. That's natural, but loneliness isn't a reason to abandon your standards. If you go back every time you feel lonely, you'll never create the space needed for something better to arrive. Owning your choice means reminding yourself that loneliness is temporary, but settling for less than you deserve has permanent consequences. You're not cutting him off because you enjoy being alone. You're cutting him off because being alone for a while is far better than being half loved forever. Another part of owning your decision is letting go of the need for him to validate it. Sometimes people want to hear, "You were right to leave me," or "I didn't deserve you." But waiting for that is just another form of holding on. Closure doesn't come from him. It comes from you deciding the story is finished, regardless of whether he admits it or not. The moment you realize that his acknowledgement is unnecessary, you free yourself from waiting for something that may never come. It's also important to shift your perspective from what you're losing to what you're gaining. Looking back keeps you tied to the idea of sacrifice. You think, "I gave up a relationship, I gave up a history," but looking forward shows you the truth. I gained my peace back, I gained my standards back, I gained the possibility of real love. That shift is where empowerment comes from. Because cutting someone off isn't a sad ending, it's a brave beginning. The more you own your choice, the stronger you feel, and over time, the doubts fade because you start to see evidence of why you were right. You notice how much lighter you feel without his drama. You notice how much energy you have when you're not overanalyzing his mixed signals. You notice how good it feels to wake up knowing you don't have to wait on someone else to decide if you're worthy today. Those realizations are your proof that you made the right call. Owning your decision and never looking back doesn't mean you'll never think of him again. It means when you do, it doesn't shake you. It doesn't pull you off course. You acknowledge the thought, and then you move forward because your eyes are fixed on something greater. You didn't cut him off to punish him, you cut him off to protect you, and when you finally embrace that truth, the idea of looking back won't even make sense anymore. Cutting someone off isn't about pretending they never existed, it's about deciding they no longer exist in your world. It's about choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over excuses, and freedom over attachment. When you stop giving him your voice, your time, your energy, you don't just remove him, you restore yourself. Every act of silence, every boundary you uphold, every reminder you remove is a step toward a stronger, freer version of you. And the beauty of this decision is that it's final. You don't need to explain it, you don't need his agreement, and you don't need to second guess yourself. You simply choose to honor your worth above all else. Because the truth is, a man who didn't deserve your love doesn't deserve your presence either. So, when you cut him off like he never existed, you're not erasing a part of your story, you're writing the part where you reclaim your power. And that is where your real life begins.